Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another Upspiral Grief interview. And today I have the absolute honor to introduce you to this lovely gentleman to my side, Michael McCarthy. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we are actually connecting across the globe at the moment. Mike, you're coming in from the UK, so I'm saying a good morning to you. It's a good evening here for us at the time of doing this interview with you. And I want to share just very quickly how we connected. So I found you on LinkedIn, and as we just had a quick pre-chat about, there is so much happening in the space of mental health, suicide prevention. It's incredible. It's actually very, very beautiful that there's more and more work done and more people are speaking out about what we can do to prevent, what we can do to help. And I find it very important to have these conversations. So I addressed you and I said, after I heard what you guys have been doing, would you be happy to come? And I feel very privileged that you said yes to me, because I know how valuable your time is. So if you don't mind, maybe just introducing yourself quickly to our audience, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure, I'm Mike McCarthy. I am a former journalist. I used to work for the BBC and for Sky News on television for much of my life. And in February 2021, after I'd retired from journalism, I was looking forward to a happy retirement, and looking back on what I regarded as a reasonably successful career. But it didn't quite turn out that way. My son Ross, who was 31, took his life in February of 2021, and that completely changed the course of my life and the lives of all our family members. One of the things that Ross said in a long farewell letter was, "Please fight for mental health. The support is just not there."
Yeah.
That really sort of, spoke to me and made me want to research the whole area of mental health, and particularly suicide prevention, hence where I am today.
Yeah, I really want to thank you up front already, for sharing your story so openly, not just with me here, but really with the entire world. I know a little bit of what you've done so far, and we'll explore it a little bit more in this interview here. I know that you have partnered up with somebody who has also lost his son, and that you've recently been interviewed. So I can only salute you, because it is fairly fresh. It's not that long that this happened. So I know a little bit about grief myself, and I should really say a lot, but it's really that story that always really speaks straight to my heart. It's like, I really find it important to say that every journey of grief is just as unique as the person experiencing it, and yet there is a message that really everybody needs to hear. And I think it's incredible that your son left this call out to you as his final message, and how you acted upon it. I'd really love for you to share a little bit more about that, because that's just incredible. You get ready for retirement and then completely start a very new career to you, actually. So can you share a little bit about that journey with us?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to you for the work that you do. I think it's so important that people like yourself share their feelings, share their strategy, if you like, in dealing with grief. And I think the world is a better place for people like you in it, Marie. With regard to my own situation,
thank you.
With regard to my own situation, obviously when something like this happens, there's enormous shock. It's like somebody's just opened your door and thrown a hand grenade in, and the world feels as though it's sort of falling apart around you, and the loss is, simply unbearable. I was going to say, but more than a year on, we've learned to live with it, and we've learned to deal with the grief. The letter from Ross was long. Basically, he'd suffered with severe depression and had done for over 10 years. And he'd become sort of very adept at pretending for the sake of his family and for his friends and the people around him, pretending not to be as sad as he was. That's the kind of person that he was. He was sort of outgoing, he was happy. Certainly on the surface, you would think that he was happy. He was sporty, he was very funny, he used to make us laugh a heck of a lot. And, you know, even though we knew that he'd been severely depressed and struggling for a long time, with hindsight, we didn't see the signs, because when your son or, you know, any of your children tell you, I'm okay, Dad, I'm okay, you want to believe that they're okay, particularly knowing how much he'd struggled. He went to the National Health Service in the UK and asked for therapy after sort of going on trying different kinds of methods to heal himself and to find his own salvation. And he was put on a 6-month waiting list for therapy, and he died 2 weeks into that wait. And once the sort of, you know, once we got sort of past the very, very raw stages of grief, I would say I felt compelled to research the whole area around mental health, and particularly suicide and suicide prevention, and to find out what resources, what facilities were there for people, and what wasn't there, more importantly, and ended up speaking to hundreds of mums, dads, brothers, sisters, psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, doctors, charities, you name it, because I just sort of felt this thirst for information. And I quickly realized that, you know, suicide prevention is an area where we drastically need much more help. There needs to be much more effort. We need to channel much more energy into supporting people in crisis, not just in this country, but I've found with conversations in Australia and in the US and India and various places that there's a sort of similar kind of story pretty much around the world.
Two questions come up straight away, you know, when I listen to you share this information. It's really quite incredible. Like, the one thing is that I feel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you have definitely got more experience in that sector than I do, but what I often hear, and you're saying the exact same thing when it comes to mental health, when it comes to suicide prevention, that there is a huge lack in the sector of acute help. When somebody reaches out, that there is not enough help available once they do. And that leads me to the second question, and I'll load them onto you straight away, both of them together, is that with the reaching out part, I have figured in the work that I do that it often takes people a really long time, where that, I would call it, the pressure of suffering gets to that point where they then finally say something, yet then it's sometimes even almost too late. And when then the wait comes in and it gets delayed that they actually receive their help, when they finally speak out, that I feel is where our biggest downfall is. Am I right in saying that, or is there?
No, I would absolutely agree with that. I think actually the lack of support, the lack of spending, the lack of attention goes right across the board. I don't think it's just at the crisis end, although, you know, there is a woefully inadequate service, I think, for people in crisis. And again, I've come across this quite a lot. A lot of families have told me, you know, they use the same phrase, revolving door, you know, that their loved ones goes to the GP to seek help. Sometimes, you know, if things get desperate, they end up in hospital, and this is what happened to Ross. The hospital refer them to the crisis team. The crisis team come out for a couple of weeks and then refer them back to the GP, and so the cycle goes on. And I've heard this so many times, you know, that GPs aren't adequately trained to deal with people who are suicidal. And it seems that the resources that are out there for people who are suicidal are, as I say, inadequate. So you've got a problem at the crisis end. But I think if you go right back to the very beginning, children in schools. We don't
Yeah.
talk. Things are starting to change, but I don't think we talk anywhere near enough as much as we should about
Yeah.
mental health and mental fitness. There's lots of
Yeah.
talk about physical fitness, not just in education, but in the media.
Yeah.
Switch the television on any evening and you've got programs about, what weight you should be, what you should
Yeah.
be eating, what your body
Yeah.
should look like, and comparatively
The ideal
discussion
world.
about,
Yeah.
and there is no health without mental health. And,
Yeah.
we ignore it at our peril. I think things are starting to change, but more slowly, I would
Yeah.
suggest, than a lot of
And
people
also just very
have.
recent. I feel it hasn't been going on for that long. I really love that you bring it back to how our kids are raised as well, because I only just had an interview with Scarlett Lewis. I'm not really sure if you're aware of her, who lost her son in a very tragic school shooting in the US at the age of 6. And she has shared a lot, and it's been 9.5 years for her. And she has brought programs into schools to raise all that, to actually raise healthier teenagers, so it doesn't even come to that rage, to that outbreak. There's obviously all sorts of different areas how lack of mental health turns out. And I'm not saying that everybody turns into somebody violent, but it's often that there's that lack of help and the lack of how do I actually get out of this state as well. There are so many different areas, but one thing that I can see in your message, in Scarlett's, and so many other people that are dealing with that topic of mental health, of suicide prevention, that it needs to start earlier. It needs to start earlier. There is really such a lack of awareness and help and in our education system that I really feel that's where it needs to start. Yet there are so many areas where we need more attention. Where
Sure, and I
are
think it
you
goes through.
at with that? Yeah, please. It
Sorry
goes
to
through.
interrupt.
No,
Maria, I
please.
think it goes through, education, through
Mm.
politics, through the
Yes.
media,
Yeah.
through all levels of
Yeah.
society. You hear of
Absolutely.
children who are struggling to cope with their mental health, and again, towards the other end of the scale in education, in universities and colleges, there are significant problems, and I get the feeling, and this has really hit me since we lost Ross, that people out there really do want to talk about this previously, taboo subject. And the agencies really haven't caught up, that governments haven't caught up, the education system hasn't caught up, media and politics haven't caught up with the wave that's happening, among society. I mean, I put one post on LinkedIn not that long after Ross died, just kind of politely asking people if they wouldn't mind, not using the phrase commit suicide, because that word commit goes back to a time more than 60 years ago in the United Kingdom, at least, when suicide was illegal. And the response was phenomenal. There were 4 million views. And I've heard similar stories from other people who've posted similar things, and got a massive reaction on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or anything else. And that tells me that people out there, there is a tidal wave of people who want to discuss these things, because those statistics aren't changing. What we're doing at the moment is not working. And certainly in the UK, suicide is the biggest killer of our young adults under 34. Not cancer, not COVID, not road accidents, not drugs, suicide. So where's the conversation? Where's the discussion? And that's kind of what motivates me.
Yeah. And is it correct, because it's not my field of expertise, but is it correct that it's a lot higher in male as well in that statistic?
Sure, and 3/4 of the people who take their lives in this country, and I think it's a similar story in Australia, I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly in the United Kingdom, 3/4 of the people who take their lives are men. And I think, we have to ask ourselves, why is that? What is happening in society that that leads to an appalling statistic like that. I mean, obviously, it's of equal tragedy, whether it's a man, woman, whoever who dies of suicide, because for every one of those people, there are many, many more who are suffering with the loss of their departure. But I think with men, and again, I get the impression that it's a similar kind of story on your side of the globe, that culturally the expectations on men in the UK, there's a phrase, I don't know whether you use it over there, but man up, which basically means, shut up, take it on the chin, suppress it, don't discuss it. That's what man up basically means. And what I'm trying to do, part of what I'm trying to do is I've started a few talking groups for men in my home city of Sheffield, in Yorkshire, in England. There are two sort of fairly well-known football clubs here, Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday. And I've opened a branch there at both sides of the city. I've opened a branch of Talk Club at both of those stadiums, and it's a great model that's really working thanks to the support of the football clubs and their community foundations.
It's amazing. So
because
needed.
It kind of gives men an excuse, if you like, to walk in and open up about their feelings rather than bottle up.
Yeah. I cannot thank you enough for doing that, for initiating that, because I feel that exactly that is needed so much more. Like literally 20 minutes before it just came live with you, I read a comment from a lady on a parenting group. I know it's a friend of mine who runs a parenting group, and there's like 30,000 people in there, and she writes about her husband, how he grew up in a rather violent environment and never learned about talking about emotions, and she reached out for help, and her husband actually addressed her and said, I really want to learn that. I want to learn that for the sake of our marriage, for the sake of our daughter. And I thought, what a beautiful example for him to be able to actually speak up and trust his wife in that. And the first thing that I suggested was, have you thought about a men's group? I think it is so important for men to have that outlet to actually discuss it, because as you said, it's here. Like I'm originally from Austria, and the one thing that really stood out for me when I moved to Australia was that I felt that it was far behind in the development of where men stand in comparison to Europe. That whole man up is so much bigger here still, and it's very old-fashioned almost. When you talk about emotions, you're a sissy, and like it's really quite appalling, or quite sad, I should say, for men, how they are put down rather than supported when they speak about emotions, and that it's almost ridiculed. And I have seen a shift now, because I've been here for almost 2 decades now, but I have seen a shift since I've been here, that it's now finally coming into that state of, it is okay for men to talk about feelings. And I mean, I have 2 boys. They were 8 and 10 when Rob died, and now I'm raising them on my own, and they're 10 and 12 and 14 now. And I'm making a huge effort to really make a point about it is okay to talk about emotions. And I don't want that to be ridiculed. I don't want, and I don't accept comments in our household that where they put each other down. And I know that part of that is being teenagers, and, they need to fight their own fights as well. But I also want to make a very big point about that. It is okay to talk about emotions. It's not manning up if you are suppressing them. And I'm very much on that, watching out what is going on behind the scenes. And honestly, Mike, I don't always know. They're 12 and 14. It's not easy to always know where they're at. And believe me, there are moments where I do worry about it. Have they dealt with it in a proper way? I always get really amazing feedback, and, through what you do, they've learned how to deal with it. But there are moments where I look at it and I'm like, really? Do I really know what's going on behind those cave doors, I call them, when they go in their caves and when they connect with their friends, and their friends are on such a different level. They have not experienced what Flynn and Jed have experienced. So I really do keep an eye out for them. And I'm thinking, as a nation, or as a whole world, do we do enough to support them, to strengthen them, to encourage them to speak out? And I don't think the answer is yes at the moment. I love that I can see a shift happening, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the change is happening, and greater change is coming. I feel quite
Yeah.
optimistic and confident about that. But I do think there's still a long way to go. I think, we're
Yeah.
still in a place where society believes that vulnerability in men is a weakness. And I think,
Yeah.
we men have got to take responsibility for that and change the course of the conversation, and
Yeah.
change the way that we deal with our emotions.
How
You
do you
know,
think we can do that?
well,
Sorry.
I think, we need to talk. First of all, we need to talk to each other, and we need
Yeah.
to listen. That's one of the key things.
Mm.
Um, I think there are sort of certain changes in our language, even that, like man up, and
Yeah.
phrases like strong silent type. I mean, again, what
Mm.
does that mean? Why is strong and silent both
Mm.
put together like that in the
Yeah.
same phrase? And I think we have to sort of, as I say, take responsibility for
Mm.
this. We have to realize that, I mean, it's like a lot of men, I think, are living a lie that, do
Mm.
we think that boxers don't cry, that rugby players don't cry, that
Mm.
footballers don't cry? Of course they do.
Yeah.
But the difference between men and women, and this is a sweeping generalization, I appreciate that,
Mm.
but I think
That's
the
okay.
difference is that when men cry, they tend to cry alone.
Mm.
And as I say, it's a generalization, and I think
Yeah.
we've got to learn to share and accept, because otherwise you keep going back to this statistic that
Yeah.
3/4 of the people who
Yeah.
take their own lives are men. I think we've really got to sort of get to the
Mm.
bottom of that and understand why that is. The world is changing, and it's changing rapidly, and has changed
Mm.
rapidly, over the past whatever 100 years.
Yeah.
And I think men are possibly, I'm no expert, but I think men are possibly struggling, again, generally speaking, to find their place in the world where they're expected to be protector, provider, but also nurturer,
Yeah.
in this day and age. And I think that sort of brings about a lot of sort of different expectations, and I'm not sure that we men have caught up with those changes in society. And what I
Yeah.
find through the talk club is that once we do talk about things like that, it becomes obvious. It's, well, yeah, of course we
Mm.
have feelings. I
Of
often sort
course,
of
yeah, and
talk about
it's incredible when you say. Sorry, I just want to say one thing quickly before we
oh,
get too far away from that. When you said, it's a generalization to say that men tend to cry when they're alone, and women are more okay with it sharing their emotions in public. I think two things here. First of all, the generalization comes from somewhere. There is a statistic. There is a quite obvious. I always say I'm also not a huge fan of generalizing things, but there is always an underlying trend that actually brings you to generalize that, because it's not coming from nowhere. That you say that it is quite obvious that's what happens. And the other thing is also, like, when we really go back to taking that term of cave time that I used before, that's what happened. The women were the ones scattering around the fireplace and chatting, and sharing their emotions, and the men were out hunting and had to be quiet to not, like, it really does come from somewhere. But we do live in a different civilization now, and I think there are certain things that are still in cave time mode that really needs to change. We do live in a different world now, and men really do need to be encouraged to share their emotions around the fireplace or wherever they are. It's really quite important. I just wanted to throw that in there.
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And there's a heavyweight boxing champion, Tyson Fury, world
Yeah.
boxing champion,
Mm.
and he's spoken quite extensively about his sort of mental health
Hmm.
problems, and
Yeah.
he's laid it all out there, and he's been sort of vulnerable. And
Mm.
we sometimes sort of talk about him in the talk clubs that I
Yeah.
do, and is a great role model in someone who physically he's proven himself
Mm.
to be one of the fittest guys on the planet,
Yeah.
but he's also not afraid to talk about his mental health and the problems that he's
Yeah.
had, and and I think he's a sort of role model in a way for all men in that respect.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. I'm really grateful. I think it really takes more than more men like him to really speak up and use their status that they have achieved and turn that into a beautiful message and an encouraging message. Mike, I want to change the course a little bit here because I want to bring you back to the interview that I actually saw that you recorded. And I know that one of the things that really stood out for me was when you spoke up about your son. And I believe it was you, please correct me if I'm wrong, because there was two of you in the interview. But I remember that one message that really stood out for me was the time that I did spend with my son. I didn't want to be down. I didn't want to go down. I wanted to make it a happy time. I wanted to. So maybe there were opportunities missed in actually talking about emotions. And I really want to bring that out because I feel that that is a message that a lot of us really need to hear right now. That how do you actually address mental health when you have those moments where you're like, oh, come on, we're going to a footy game, I don't want to bring that up right now, or I haven't seen him for so long, I don't want to bring that up right now. There doesn't seem to be the right time ever when we think about that to bring up mental health. So how do you address it? Can you please share your message about what is a good way to actually bring up the topic of mental health when you are with family or really close friends? How do you even start that?
I'm not sure that I have the answer. I think, everyone is sort of individual and everyone wants to sort of deal with things in an individual way. One of the things that I say to people based on my own experience is that I think as a dad, I just wanted to fix Ross. That's what dads do. They fall down and scrape the knee and you fix it. You put a plaster on it or you wipe it clean, and with Ross, I think, maybe I could have listened more, just listening. And it's as simple as that. Just waiting for them to present you with the opportunity rather than you trying to force an opportunity on them, just being sort of, aware, listen out for the odd comment that they might sort of drop into a conversation, but above all, listen.
That's beautiful.
It's always the way, isn't it, after these things happen that it seems almost universal that people question themselves about whether they could have done or said more. And we did talk to Ross about his mental illness. We talked quite a lot. But the person I think who you may be referring to, Steve Phillip, who's a guy that lost his son Jordan and set up a charity here in the UK, and I've got together with Steve to
that was a gentleman you had the interview with, is that correct? Like you did
that's right,
joint interview
on BBC on the network news. We're basically launching a campaign, an initiative called Baton of Hope that I can talk about more if you'd like me to. But basically,
yes, please. It was one of the many reasons why I asked you to come to be able to speak about that, because like that interview grabbed my attention. That interview made me reach out to you, and I said, I really want you to come and share this to my audience if you can. So I'm very grateful for that. Yes, please do share about the initiative.
Yeah, well, Steve, I was just going to say that, I think he spoke about his son Jordan, and he again was aware that Jordan suffered from quite severe depression, and they would go out together for a beer or whatever, and Steve was saying how hard it is, at the end of the evening, to say, so how's your mental health? You don't want to.
I wasn't sure if it was him or you, so it was him who said that.
It was it's sort of finding the right opportunity, and if you have had a great evening out together, for example, it's difficult then to suddenly, isn't it, to introduce something like that while your son seems to be reasonably happy. And there were times again with
that.
Ross that he didn't want to talk about his mental health, and you couldn't make him. He was his own man. He was 31. He had his own life. So this is why I say, it's more about listening sometimes than talking. Just listening to your children, and anything that's sort of unusual or untoward. It's so difficult and so complex, I think, with suicide, because very often, as you know, people who've determined that is the course that they are going to take become more peaceful within themselves. And I think with Ross, he had seemed to make some improvement. And when somebody in that situation says, "I'm okay, Dad, I'm okay," as a parent, you so want to believe that they're
I just
okay.
want to say that, I can only imagine.
But anyway, the baton of hope. I got together with Steve and some other people who have been sort of bereaved as a result of suicide, and people from charities and various walks of life. And we decided to have a 2-week event in the UK next June it'll be, where we take around a specially designed baton. It's being crafted and designed by Goldsmiths to the Queen in the UK, a company called Thomas Light, who make major sporting trophies, like the Ryder Cup in golf and the FA Cup in football and things like that. We'll take that round, and the aim is to highlight the projects that are out there that already exist, to show to people that there is hope, that there is support. It can sometimes not be easy to find, so we want to highlight some of these many fantastic projects that are taking place, projects such as your own, Marie, and also we hope to sort of galvanize public opinion and to inspire new projects to help people sort of deal with their mental health, and specifically to help reduce these stubbornly high suicide figures. I think we need a sea change. We need a different approach. And at its core, the baton of hope is to smash through the stigma, to encourage people to get involved in an open, healthy dialogue about suicide prevention and mental health, but also to stimulate real productive action. We don't want to just be a sort of 2-week shooting star or whatever you want to call it. We want there to be lasting legacies.
To be an initiator.
That kind of story. So, and we've had interest from over there in Australia and the US and various places, but for the moment we're focusing on the UK, but who knows? Who knows?
I'll actually be in Europe around that time. I'll be in Austria most likely if everything goes okay. But the one thing that really stands out for me, like in particular with all the interviews I did lately, the one thing that really arises from everything is collaboration. How important it is for us to really form that chain of connection, of collaboration, of making use of each other's networks and really spread that message. And what more suitable name than the baton of hope? I really love that. There's so much power behind that. I really, really love the idea of it, and I'd be more than happy to support in whatever way, shape or form I can, even if it's just by spreading the message. I'd be really very open to collaborating there as well. So
that is so good of you to say so, Marie. And that
I really mean it. I really mean it, like from the bottom of my heart. I think collaboration is so important in everything that we do.
I think you've hit on a really important subject there, and the reason it's a baton rather than a torch is, because a baton represents responsibility. Once you're given the baton, you accept responsibility. And we want to put out the message that we all have responsibility, whether you're at the top layer of society and government or whoever you are. You know, we all have a responsibility, whether it's just a hand on someone's shoulder or that extra text message to a mate saying, are you really okay? You know, are you really okay? All of us have a responsibility, and we want the baton to have a final resting place in the Houses of Parliament in London, where it'll be a permanent reminder to MPs and legislators as they go about their daily work. Remember all of the people that we've lost. Hear their voices and listen to the voices of all of those who may find themselves in that same dark place. And I think there's fragmentation within the sort of charitable sector. And another thing that the Baton of Hope is aiming to do is to bring unity to people who are currently speaking, you know, separately. We want people to speak with one voice, and that's really, again, at the core of what the Baton stands for.
Yeah, I really love that what you said. You know, the unity is so important, and I also love that you have used that word quite often today, the responsibility, you know, the responsibility that we take on and that we have with that. And to me, it really comes back to reminding ourselves that we do have the responsibility, and to really think about that word, what it actually means. We have the ability to respond here, to do something. And I find that is such a privilege. Because those of us who have left before us, who have transitioned, passed over, whatever wording you prefer in that scenario, I think we do have a responsibility for them, you know, to really carry on that message, to carry that message forward, and to really do share that baton of hope and to carry out the hope into this world. And what you said, I really love that. I want to highlight that one more time, to send that extra text message. You know, I even had like just a normal meeting with my business mentor today, and we exchanged the normal, you know, how you going? Yeah, good, you good. And I looked at him, I said, so how are you really? And he looked at me, it's like, did I leave an impression? I said, no, but I know that there were things going on in your life, and I just really wanted to know if you are okay. And he said, I so appreciate that. And at the end of our meeting, he went back to that. He said, you have no idea what that means to me, that you asked me how I truly am. And I thought, this is so beautiful, because I really meant it. I could feel how much was going on. And we, as a nation, I want to say, we're so used to, how you going? Yeah, good. How are you? It's almost like a greeting. It's not a real question anymore. And it's not a question, even if you see it as such, where you expect somebody to say, you know what, I'm not good. You actually expect them to say, yeah, good, how are you? It's really more used like a greeting these days than it is really a question. And I think such a simple thing can sometimes really save somebody's life, to go back to actually asking and really wanting to know, and to come back to what you said before, to listen to how are you actually, you know. And I have really trained myself to, in particular after Rob died, to not just say, yeah, good, how are you? But to go like, you know what, today I'm actually not doing well. And I did that with my brother-in-law today. He said, how are you going? And rather than usually, yeah, good, I was like, you know what, not good at the moment. And I really talked to him about it, and it felt so good to be able to share, because we had a lot of things going on in our family. My father-in-law is not doing really well, and it really got to me. You know, it brought up a lot of things from Rob's passing, and because it's Rob's dad, you know, it really triggered a lot of things. And it was so beautiful, because out of that one question, how are you? And me, rather than saying, yeah, I'm good, how are you? I said, actually, I'm not coping. We had an hour conversation, really deep rooted emotional stuff that came out, and I was so grateful, and I think he was too. So I'm sharing that, although it's very personal, because maybe that's something that triggers whoever is watching this right now, needs to hear that rather than saying, yeah, I'm good, to actually trust your heart and say what you really feel, and sometimes even ask the other person, so how are you really feeling? And it doesn't take that much, you know. I love that you said that. Sometimes it's really just, or very often, that listening intentionally.
Absolutely. And, you know, at Talk Club, the talking groups that I spoke about, we have sort of 4 rounds of questions. And the first question is, how are you out of 10 and why? You know, so that avoids the sort of blokish answer, I'm fine. You know, did you see the match last night or whatever?
You mean out of 10?
You kind of have to ask it. And it's not a formality, you know, how are you? I'm good, you, as you
I
say,
love that.
you know. So
sometimes so simple, you know, it doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
No, it's the sort of simplicity of it that works, actually. You know, it's talking and listening, and really talking, you know, talking about what really matters.
And I also find that often when we start to share ourselves, that it really triggers it for other people, or that it makes it okay for other people to share as well. And you know, the case of the conversation I had with my brother-in-law today, I don't know if he would have talked about everything that he did if I wouldn't have started with, you know what, I'm actually not good. You know, this is really triggering a lot of things for me. It's brought up a lot of things, and I'm on such an emotional roller coaster at the moment. And this is coming from me, somebody who's so used to dealing with grief on a daily basis, who's offering help, who's holding space for others. And now I'm going through a time where I'm reeling, and I felt like, well, if I'm the one who's teaching it, I'm not reaching out to others. What good am I as a teacher if I can't do that myself? And I really felt like I needed to do that. I've spoken to quite a few very close friends of mine the last couple of days and weeks about how I truly feel. And it felt so good to be able to just open up about that and not do the usual, you know what, I'm good, I'm strong, I can do this. Well, of course I can. But do I want to? Do I have to? Do I have to do this on my own? I think that's the big point here. You don't have to do this on your own. And we often forget about what a support network we actually have. And I really encourage people who feel they don't have one to really actively create one, because we can all do that.
Yeah, I think, you know, so often life should be about human engagement. And I think society, you know, the busyness of society imposes on us restrictions and limits on how much time we actually talk about what's going on in here, you know. And as people often say, we feel so much and express so little about what's going on. I agree. And it's unhealthy. And, you know, I think it's the opposite, actually, that vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength.
It takes a lot of strength.
Actually makes us who we are as human beings, you know. But I think we've allowed ourselves to be sort of forced into a situation where we don't even give ourselves time to talk about the things that really matter.
And it's quite incredible what you said at the beginning. I actually want to bring it back to a comment you made at the beginning that really stood out for me. We spend so much time watching television, and it's all about, you know, it's all about how perfect we need to be or how we're supposed to be. And we all spend so much time on social media, more than ever. You know, the numbers are rising tremendously. I'm talking like hours and hours of like 10, 15 hours a day screen time. That is almost the norm these days. But we are so busy spending it in portraying how perfect our life is, rather than doing the real connection thing. You know, the original reason why social media was invented was to connect. And the more connected we are on social media, the more disconnected we sometimes are on a really, truly deep down emotional level. And I believe that also, in that being said, there's also a shift happening in that. So we are creating this shift, like you and I are talking about this, are part of this shift in using social media for a more purposeful and responsible kind of way. And I love that we are having this conversation, Mike. It really means a lot to me that you are offering your time. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and as I say, you know, I'm grateful for your interest, and it's fantastic to be able to connect with someone. You know, this is one of the benefits of you know, technology and social media and all the rest of it, to be able to speak to someone like yourself on the other side of the world. But you know, you're absolutely right that I think, you know, with the way things are going, if we don't get to grips with this, things can only get worse, and we're only going to sort of lose more good people. And again, you know, I think there's a saying, you know, every man's death diminishes me, and I think that's so true, that whenever we lose anybody too soon, too early, to something like suicide, it's an indictment for all of us, and you know, we all lose something. And I keep coming back to the thing that it's the biggest killer of young people, you know, and what an incredible waste. And I think, you know, in times to come, we'll look back and we'll look at those statistics and think, why did we leave it so long? Why did we take so long to respond to this, you know, silent crisis? So you know, I'm optimistic about the future.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. And to wrap things up here, there's actually one thing that I really want to say. Like, even the origin of the word crisis has opportunity in it, has choices in it. So rather than waiting for crisis to give us opportunities, I would really like to put a shout out there to anyone listening to this, to not wait for your own crisis to be affected, but to take ours as an opportunity. And I'm more than happy to offer you ours, to have this conversation now. Don't wait for any crisis in your family. Don't wait for the one day where you sit there and say, I wish I had. Just do it now. Often people say to me, because I was very grateful that Rob and I had these conversations, you know, the what would happen one day if something was to happen to me or you. And we took these conversations based on somebody else's crisis. You know, when Rob came home from work and there was a fatal accident, it actually triggered a really amazing, beautiful conversation between the two of us. What would happen if? And I'm glad that we had these conversations, because both of us said, I would want you to take the boys and create the happiest life possible. And that was really something that I knew that's what I had to do when Rob died. You know, of course, back then it was theory. No, none of us thought that that would happen at the age of 45 in the prime of his life, but it did happen. And weirdly enough, how you often don't know how this affects you, you know, the circles of life and how they sometimes, situations like that go full circle. The widow of the gentleman who died on the road that triggered Rob and my conversation is now in my group. So it's just absolutely incredible, you know, how things just happen sometimes that affect us in different ways. And I'm absolutely certain that your story has affected and triggered so many people. So I'm putting the shout out there, have these conversations, because one day they might be such a blessing for you. I know that it's sometimes confronting, but have these conversations now. And I would like to bring that back to you now, Mike. If there's anything that you would like to highlight or share as that final shout out, then what is the one message that you want people to take away from this conversation we had?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it yourself, Marie. I think this word responsibility, because it's kind of an equation, vulnerability on the one hand, but resilience on the other. And I think that vulnerability and resilience can go hand in hand.
Oh, I love that.
They're not opposites, you know, that vulnerability and resilience are strength together. And also,
they can coexist.
One thing that, you know, you are a shining example of, and you know, I think for anybody who's bereaved and feels that, you know, they have nowhere to go and that they'll never be able to get through it, and that's how I felt. I just thought, I can't function like this, you know, and that's effectively, you know, life is over for me. But I've come to realize gradually that, you know, we can go forward, and we can take positive things out of some of the saddest and most dreadful things that happen to us in our lives. We can take something positive from them, and we can learn to live with that grief in a positive way.
I just want to add to that. It's just so beautiful, the message you put out there, and I'm so grateful that we had this conversation. And I think, you know, people often say to me that it's absolute BS that time heals all wounds, and I agree with that. I don't think that it's time who heals all wounds. It's us who show kindness to ourselves and to actually decide. I think it takes a decision that you want to heal, that you want to allow healing in. And by us looking at the tragedy of a young life lost way too soon, that actually makes us appreciate more than anyone how precious life really is. And we do need to apply that to our own lives as well. And we sometimes forget that. We sometimes keep the focus on a life that is lost rather than bringing what we've just learned and just experienced on a deeper level than anybody else to apply that to our own lives and everybody else's lives who we affect. So I want you to never underestimate the effect that you have on other people. And you certainly have, Mike, by the way you have responded to your son's suicide, by the way what you've done with it, but the message you put out there right now, it just goes to show how much impact one person can have in this life. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do, for the message that you do put out there, and for the time that you have given us to share your message. I really, really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. And as I say, thanks for your interest and for inviting me.
Absolutely. And for everybody watching this, we will share, whatever links you want to share, Mike, we will share that underneath the interview so people can get in touch with you or can hear more about the Baton of Hope. We will share anything there is underneath the interview. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And this is Mike and Marie signing off. Bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.